The Agenda in the Summer with Nam Kiwanuka is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.
Summer music festivals are back. So to celebrate all this July, the Agenda in the Summer revisits conversations with a diverse cast of musicians and music experts. Tonight, Miranda Mulholland from 2018. Music has never been more available, accessible, or abundant than it is today. Much of that is thanks to our digital age, but that hasn't translated into great news for all musicians. Miranda Mulholland knows the realities firsthand. She's an incredibly versatile and accomplished musician, record label creator, and festival organizer. And it's a pleasure to welcome her to our studio to explain. Lots of things, you wear many hats.
I do.
But I guess in this day and age for musicians, you have to. How do you balance everything?
Well, there's a lot of time sort of organizing my own time in a day-to-day way. But I find that because everything sort of flows into everything else, the label, the festival, my own work as a soloist and in bands, there is a marriage of all of them. So there's sort of a natural organic progression to my day where it does lead into all these things. But certainly scheduling is difficult.
Well, I want to show people at home you in your element as a musician. Let's take a look.
But not in heaven, but on the sixth concession, we'll find comfort from the actions with thee. You know I found you where I hoped I'd lost you. You know I want you to find your way to me. But I wanted nothing, so I got nothing. But it turned to something and I made myself free.
And there you are with Harold Fair. What's it like to be in that element, in your element, performing and singing?
Well, this particular band is one of the best musical collaborations that I've ever had over the course of my 15-year career. I've been a side person, so I've played with groups like Great Lake Swimmers and Jim Cuddy, Alan Doyle, among others. But this one is a real equal partnership. So Andrew Penner, who is the other half of Harold Fair, he plays drums, as you saw, and guitar, and everything else. And I go through my amp with my fiddle and sing. I mean, it's a really
You seem really happy.
Really equal partnership.
Yeah, but you seem happy when you're making music.
Oh yeah, there's nothing better than the actual art of performing, I find, yeah.
So with digital technology, we've all been under the impression that digitization has democratized the process for a lot of industries, including music. Has it?
Well, that was the promise when the digital era was on the forefront, and it has not come to pass in such a way. The democratization, it's sure people can make albums in their bedrooms now. There's a lot more available. We've never had so much content ever in the history of the world as there is now. But unfortunately, that's just led to more middlemen rather than
eliminating the middleman.
Well, exactly,
Right.
yeah.
So the middleman before was the record label.
That was, yeah, one of them, yeah.
But now?
Well, now instead of the record label, which actually has a foundation and an amplifier and something set up in order to get your music out there and heard, now there's just a flood of content as well, and fewer tastemakers. I mean, we don't have as many people actually writing about music with any kind of education.
Really?
Well, look at all the art sections that are being cut from newspapers across the board. I mean, first they're taken from arts and now, and then entertainment, and now it's entertainment and sport. I mean, there just aren't as many working journalists.
Well, let's take a look at the history of this digital disruption. So in 1996, the World Intellectual Property Organization had the copyright treaties drafted in response to increased digitization. In 1998, wow, Google was incorporated. 1999, Napster and other peer-to-peer sharing services appeared online. 2001, the iPod is introduced. I remember this. 2003, Apple opens the iTunes Music Store. 2005, YouTube is launched. And 2008, Spotify is launched. How have these digital milestones changed the music industry?
Well, we've seen a sharp erosion of revenue. So for the same thing that if I had created a song and worked with a producer to put it out, paid all my musicians, paid the producer, the amount of money that I'm making now is wildly less than what I would be making 20 years ago before the digital disruption. And I'm not against change. And the great thing, there are a lot of great things about the digital disruption and disruption in general. I think we need it in order to move forward. But
But you're making less money now because?
Radically less money, yes.
Because of people are not buying music, or?
People are not buying music. I mean, we had as you saw, Napster and pirated music. The value of music has gone down. People, even though people can have, on your phone, you have any song that you want in the whole wide world for, if you paid for it, like $9.99. But we still have seen this, the creators get less and less and less of this revenue.
And how has this affected you personally?
Well, it's been interesting because I entered the marketplace as a small business. I mean, every musician is a small business in 1999. So a really bad time to start being a professional musician. But I was still seeing how what had come before me. So I was in parts of bands that had the benefits of actually selling records and making money from their work. And so I have noticed dwindling album sales. There's a marketplace that's just flooded with content. So there's an exhaustion. I mean, people talk about the Netflix effect, but I don't see it so much as the Netflix effect, which means that people aren't going out as much because they can stay home. But I think it's a symptom of just being overwhelmed with content.
So you don't know what to choose.
You don't know what to choose. I mean, if you see that there's a concert going on at Massey Hall, or you could see 10 other bands the same night, there's a comedy show, you go to a movie, there is sort of an exhaustion, I think, of just, we'll have to stay home and,
and chill.
Yeah. And it's too bad. I mean, I think that philosophically that's challenging, and I think that's sort of it's something that culturally we'll have to address. But it certainly affects me greatly. Yeah.
But I think some people would argue that you have certain artists like the Drakes, the Justin Biebers, Shawn Mendes. They've been able to take advantage of this digital disruption and actually probably been more successful than if it hadn't existed in the first place. Mm-hmm. So why does it work for some artists and not others?
Well, the way that the business models are structured with something like Spotify is it's based on market share. So if I put out a record the same month as Drake, and my album was spun a certain amount of times or streamed on this platform, because Drake would have such wildly higher streaming numbers as a more popular and more mainstream artist, one would argue, his per stream number would be higher than mine. So there's not a general, if you made a record and I made a record, what we got paid would not be the same.
And do you think too that in music there's so many labels, and I don't want to label your music, but do you think that because Drake has played on pop radio that benefits those artists?
Oh, of course. I mean, just in terms of being a more mainstream artist would benefit him. The way that the algorithms work, the more times you're played, the more likely it will be that you are played at random. That's just how it works. Mm-hmm. So again, it's that market share business model that puts the fringe, the niche artists at risk. And speaking as a niche artist, I mean, my first band was a totally unpopular jazz, cabaret, opera, noir thing. That's pretty niche. But
I'm thinking you'd be reaching a lot of different people because you have so many categories,
well, I
right?
think, but it's sadly not. It's in the past. But the thing is that the argument is made. Well, you could reach the people who like jazz, cabaret, noir. Those 5 people around the world, you can now find them on the internet. Well, you can, but because it's a niche and it's being streamed less and less, the less it gets streamed, the less likely it is. Your ability to find those people is greatly diminished.
And so the way that Spotify works is that they give a certain percentage to the labels, and then the labels give the artists a certain percentage of that money?
Well, it depends on how you're set up. So myself, I have a boutique record label, and I have 10 artists on my label. And I get, through my distribution company, they funnel the streaming income, which is quite risible, to me, and then I give it to my artists. They take a percentage of it, the distribution companies. So that's the way that works in my particular case.
There's been talks of Spotify becoming a label itself, and therefore eliminating the so-called middle person. Is that a good idea or a bad idea?
Well, once again, it's sort of just creating another problem, I think. I mean, I applaud them for trying to make new content and trying to do something that we've seen the success of this with Netflix. Obviously, Netflix has been creating their own content rather than using other people's content. But that in there lies the problem, because now we have an algorithm-based company who is putting their content first. If you go to Netflix, what comes up at the first bar?
All the Netflix.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So once again, if you're a niche artist and you're trying to get your music heard around this, democracy platform, now you'll be in competition with Spotify based productions. So once again, it's stacked against you.
I'm wondering when was, like back in the 50s and 60s, when I guess was it a resurgence of music? People became, there was so much music to choose from. What was it like back then? Were artists getting paid fairly?
Well, I haven't got my time machine, but but I have seen the results. It's interesting. I just saw this amazing keynote by a man named Jonathan Taplin, and he was talking about his friend Levon Helm, who was in the band. And now this is a U.S. Obviously, some of the band were Canadian, but Levon is an American citizen. And because of some of their laws that they had in place, he was not making any revenue off of some of his songs that had been written. It was called the Classics Act before a certain time. So even though he had been in this very wildly successful band and written some of these amazing songs, after a certain point, he wasn't getting any money for them. And this became a huge problem. He got very sick and couldn't pay his medical bills. And it got to a point where, this legend couldn't sustain himself. And Jonathan, was talking about this particular tragedy, about how we're not taking care of our artists. And this is through something like legislation, like just to have the Classics Act come into play in the U.S. And we have certain legislations here in Canada that are different, but could be just as useful to pull that lever and help out artists now.
Well, in Canada, we have something that is supposed to help artists, SOCAN. What is SOCAN?
SOCAN is a collection. What they do is anytime music is played, they identify who wrote it, and they make sure that the creators are being paid. It's a very good organization.
And you're a member of it?
I am, yeah.
Okay. And let's just take a look at 2017. Some good news and some bad news for SOCAN. There were record revenues for its 150,000 member songwriters, composers, and music publishers in 2017. Total performing revenues in 2017 was over $350 million, a 6.4% increase over 2016. Internet audio streaming revenues hit $49.3 million, a 46% increase over 2016. Now, the bad news was the vast majority of SOCAN members who received payment for their stream music in 2017 earned an average of only $38.72 despite the growth. What do you think of that?
Well, once again, that speaks to the market share question. So, Drake did very well. The Weeknd did very well, and that's wonderful, and it's good. It's good news. Our politicians are certainly making a meal of it. It is good news. We've also had such a drastic drop off in revenue. So to announce any kind of incline makes total sense, because now we at least have some models like Apple Music, which you have to pay for. They have no ad-based subscription series. Spotify does have ad-based, and they also have subscription. And more people are hopefully subscribing. It's only $9.99.
But I'm guessing the majority don't.
Well, unfortunately, majority do not as of yet. Their projections were off. They had hoped to have a lot bigger subscriptions. Subscribers, I guess, and they don't. The biggest problem in this particular landscape right now is YouTube, who pays the record lowest amount to songwriters.
A lot of people would think that YouTube is a great place to showcase new artists, new creators. Why do you say that?
Okay, so YouTube is under my Google is under a lot of safe harbor rules because of our government, which means that it doesn't have to abide by certain tax laws, and it doesn't have to pay royalties to a certain extent. So what we're actually having here is a corporation that says that they are merely, as they call it, I think, dumb pipe, but it's sort of just sort of the storefront window. They're claiming that they're just the window, and they have no influence over what goes in the window because it's user uploaded content. So because they can say that, they get this safe harbor. As soon as they start to do something like Spotify, where they're programming streaming and they claim that they're sort of a broadcaster, they would have to pay those taxes. They don't. So right now, even though they now are generating content through those dumb pipes and suggesting things to you, if you go and you listen to a song you like, something will come up next.
Yeah.
And so they actually are a suggesting service. So they're sort of going against what they said that they weren't going to do.
And these laws are from like the 1990s, right?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these things that we have in our Copyright Act and that our government has put in place to help start tech companies, to make sure that they had footing in a new environment. The environment has changed so drastically over the last 20 years. We really need to update them and take a look at who they're actually protecting. Because now we're protecting Silicon Valley and we're not protecting Canadian creators.
Because when you think about it, if all creators decided not to do anything on YouTube, or if all companies said you can't use our stuff, what would be on YouTube?
Well, exactly. But they do. I mean, a lot of artists go and say, please take down my music. Someone has uploaded it illegally. But it's whack-a-mole.
Right.
I mean, it comes down and then it goes back up again. So that's a real problem.
What are industry cross-subsidies?
Industry cross-subsidies, we have one sort of big example of this. It's the radio royalty exemption. And it was created, I think, in 1997. And it was for... our country is so big. And so we've had all these little outposts of radio stations across the country, a lot of mom and pop stations that are kind of keeping communities together and making sure that communities have a voice. And they were being taxed, having to pay royalties on their income that they made for any of their ads and revenue from there. So there was a subsidy made, which was, they only have to pay $100 in royalties on their first $1.25 million in ad revenue that they make.
Jeans cost more than that.
Yeah, I know. Which is kind of insane when you think about it now, because most of those ma and pa stations have been bought up by our major media companies. So now artists, your favorite Canadian artists, are subsidizing Bell and Rogers and all the big media companies because they're getting this tax break. And that's just...
What do labels think of that? Or is it just labels rely so much on radio to get music heard?
Oh, it's across the board that everyone agrees this is unfair. I mean, if this happened, if this was pulled, this lever was pulled by the government and they said, okay, we're going to take another look at this cross-subsidy and we're going to say what was fair in 1997 no longer is fair. We're going to pull this exemption or change it or allow some of the remaining ma and pas to keep it, but yet...
Not for the big radios.
Yeah, if there was some kind of lever pulled that would allow so many millions of dollars to go directly to the labels and to artists.
So how do artists make money if you're not making it from record sales, and if you're not making it from these streaming platforms? How do you make money?
Well, I'll tell you a funny story. So I started a music festival last year, and I texted a friend of mine who is a multi-Juno award winner. And I wanted to see if he was available for the festival. So I just said, are you available this weekend? And gave him the dates. And he's texted me right back and he said, oh no, I've been booked up for ages. And then 5 minutes later, I got another text and he said, oh, did you mean as a musician? I thought you wanted to rent my Airbnb.
Oh no.
So I know, so this is a Juno Award winner. And
so you have to hustle?
You have to hustle. I mean, once again, you have to wear a lot of hats. And I even feel, though, I was very fortunate for a lot of reasons. One, my parents really believed in music and gave me violin lessons, when I was 4 and really made me stick with it, which was, very important and taught me the real benefits of live performance and music. But I also did get to see what the previous generation's lives had looked like. So a lot of the people that I play with, had a very different career leading up the first 10 years of their career than I did.
Make a living, right?
And so to sort of see, I mean, at first I thought maybe I'm just not good enough. But I started talking to other friends of mine, and it was across the board. I mean, people that I thought were doing way better than me, but it was a real problem right now. And so the people that I actually want to advocate for and try to change some of these things is the younger people who are coming up now, who perhaps they've had their band program cut in school. I mean, music education is so important. And those people who are trying to contemplate what a music career could even look like in this climate. And so there's, things that we can all do to help these young people actually be able to see a viable career in music.
What do you think needs to be changed then?
Well, I think the government does need to take some steps. The radio royalty exemption is one. There's another one that's actually really interesting. Who knew that copyright could be so interesting? But so one is just a slight change in the wording on the Copyright Act. I myself played fiddle on the TV show Republic of Doyle. So whenever you hear a fiddle on that show,
that's you,
which is often it's me.
That's all. So cool.
Yeah, and so I did those sessions with a great composer and went into the studio and recorded those. And now, because of a tiny wording of what a sound recording means, anytime that show is played and it's syndicated worldwide now. So, I mean, I've seen it in Holland, I've seen it in France, Alan Hocko dubbed in French.
So you get lots of checks?
No, because every time that's played, I do not get paid. The composer gets paid, but I do not, and the actors get paid. But because of this tiny definition of sound recording in the Copyright Act, I don't get paid.
How do you explain that to people? Because they must think that your music is on a television show that people watch around the world, but you're not getting any money from it.
Well, I think it's supremely unfair. I mean, and to come down to such a small thing as a wording, that's sort of shocking. And there are many countries around the world, I think 44 countries, that if I had performed that music in that country and it was on their air, and that I would be paid. So this is not, Canada is an exception. We're not leading the charge here on fair pay.
I know you're doing a lot of advocacy right now, but what keeps you motivated to keep making music in this climate where you're not being supported?
What keeps me motivated is live performance and just the joy of performing and creating something that, in this time of so much content, live performance is something that will never happen again. You'll never be in that room with those exact people on that exact day. And that energy is just unlike anything. I mean, I was addicted to it when I was a kid and playing, Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. And that joy and that passion keeps me going. I love collaborating. I feel as though, especially in this sort of siloed business approach of the Spotifys and these big tech companies, mine is a lot more sort of thinking like an ecosystem. I believe that we all have a responsibility to incubate, to nurture, to educate. And so hence the festival. I mean, I went from having a little label to starting a music festival because I wanted to employ my friends and people I believe in, and I wanted to get people who maybe hadn't been heard before in front of a bigger audience or an audience of people who didn't know who they were, and celebrate together.
What would you like to see, like for the rest of the music industry to do, like the record labels, the radio stations, and the streaming services?
Well, I think the streaming services need to take a look at their business model. Right now, if you ask a Spotify employee, and I keep picking on Spotify, but at least they're trying to do something. So there is that, and I'd say if you don't subscribe to a streaming service, subscribe rather than just the ad-based, because it does actually help musicians. But I think their business model, they say, well, I say, what is your product? And they would say, our product is Spotify. Well, their product isn't Spotify. Their product is our music that they're using at unfair low prices. And so that, to take a look at the fairness of that and actually what is their product and who are they serving.
Do you think fans realize that, you just said that for fans to subscribe because you're supporting the artist. Do you think fans actually realize that, I guess everybody likes things for free and they're fans of the music, but maybe there's a disconnect as to realize what's happening with musicians, because it's painted as if it's a really lavish profession, and let me just take this for free. It's not like they're going to miss it.
Well, I think there was a myth that happened around the time of Napster where people thought, well, I'm stealing Britney Spears, that we're going back in time here, and it doesn't harm anybody else because she's so rich, it doesn't matter. But the problem was, what happened was all of those little arteries that went off to the niche artists that those record companies were supporting got choked off because they could no longer spend money on these niche artists. So suddenly the mainstream just got more mainstream. I mean, in the niche stuff, that's where the exciting stuff is happening. You know, you go to the Cameron House in Toronto on any given night and you hear really cool things on Tranzac. I mean, Toronto's an incredible place to hear live music. And
also the places that you can hear live music are also disappearing.
Well, of course, with real estate prices and things. Yeah, that's another challenge.
Tell me about your festival.
Well, my festival is in Gravenhurst, first weekend of August, so the August long weekend. My great-great-grandfather was, I obviously never met him. Someone asked me if I met him. I was like, well, again,
you go back in time.
I know. I wish I'd met him. My great-great-grandfather was this incredible man named Charles Mickle, and he started a sawmill up in Gravenhurst, which is, the town became known as Sawdust City because of this sawmill. And
very rock and roll.
I know. And he also was the mayor, I think 2 or 3 times. And when he was the mayor, he had this opera house built on the main street, and it's still there today. It's 117 years later. And it's one of the top 10 acoustics in Canada. And for him to believe in this more blue-collar town that the arts mattered, I think is a real incredible testament to his vision. So
you're carrying the legacy
I'm
forward.
trying to carry the legacy forward. I think this town is gorgeous. It's historic. There's a beautiful barge that was built in the 60s that's on the water, on Gull Lake. And then you can watch the concerts. They have a whole series, a music series that's free every summer, every Sunday. And we've plugged ourselves into the series. So we have shows at the Opera House. We have a show on the music barge, and you can watch from your kayak or your canoe or the beach or the grass and hear amazing music all weekend long in Gravenhurst.
Well, Miranda, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks
You've
for having
given us
me.
a lot to think about, and I am going to subscribe
Yay!
instead of taking for free.
Thank you so much.
It was a pleasure to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
And that is tonight's Agenda in the Summer. I'm Nam Kiwanuka. Thanks for watching TVO and for joining us online at tvo.org. And we'll see you again next time.
The Agenda in the Summer with Nam Kiwanuka is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.